We're happy to introduce a painting from the later part of Rockwell's career, published in Look magazine in 1965. It was one of the major civil rights paintings that he created based upon a subject that he personally was very concerned with, and that was the equality of all throughout the world and in every case. In the case of this piece, it was actually commissioned by Look magazine for an article, and the article was called Southern Justice. And it was an article that actually addressed the fact that the African American community was served by a justice system that was completely white. And the article pointed out issues relating to the fact that in some cases many minor offenses were actually being punished quite harshly, and that the African American community did not have representation in the courts in Mississippi at that time. So Rockwell's work actually focused on one particular event, and that was the murder of 3 civil rights workers in Mississippi in the summer of 1964.
So we see Rockwell here really departing from what we're used to seeing. Rockwell now showing America the way it is instead of an America that we'd like to remember, we'd hope to remember. Rockwell reflecting on the death of these 3 men, a news story that if we had the term at that point, we would have said it went viral. It was just an obvious statement that the systems that were in place in Mississippi, in this case Philadelphia, Mississippi, were not systems that were supporting everyone.
The painting actually focuses on 3 particular individuals. They were Michael Schwerner, who is seen standing with the white shirt on, James Chaney, who has obviously been shot and is kneeling on the ground, and Andrew Goodman, who's already been killed. They actually were murdered by the deputy sheriff of the region, Sheriff Price, who with his posses basically tailed the 3 young men and had them shot point blank and then buried in a nearby farm where dirt was actually pushed over them in order to conceal the crime. Rockwell was so taken by that he actually began to conduct his own research. And fortunately, we have in our archives quite a bit of material relating to the piece. We have handwritten notes that actually described each of the victims in fairly good detail. We have news clippings that would have appeared at the time about the murder. And we also have a very interesting photograph showing Rockwell himself with a white shirt on, much as you would see Michael Schwerner there. And Rockwell actually procured human blood in order to be as authentic as possible in showing what that might have looked like on the gentleman's shirt. So he essentially put all of this together and began to work on his subject. In 1963, Rockwell had actually left the Saturday Evening Post after 47 years. And he was invited by Look magazine to create more repertorial pieces. And if you look at the piece, it is very distinct from the kind of wonderful work that Rockwell did for the Post. It's very pared down. It does not have the high level of detail that he would have used in a storytelling cover. It's really much more news-oriented. And I think Rockwell really sort of was challenged to experiment with looking at things in a new way. In fact, the painting method is quite different from what he had done in the past. He essentially uses a monochrome here, these beautiful sepia tones to tell the story of the night around 10 o'clock when the event occurred. He uses dramatic lighting. And the only color that is seen in the piece is actually the blood on James Chaney's t-shirt. So that creates a tremendous amount of drama, and in fact, he uses a sense of implied danger, because when we look to the right-hand section of the lower section of the painting, we see that there are some imposing figures there. In fact, Rockwell tried a more horizontal composition. He did some studies where he showed Deputy Price and sort of a posse of officers wielding sticks and guns, but realized that it would be more dramatic and perhaps, sort of more powerful to leave out those details and create just a sense that there was danger in the region. One of the things that he did throughout his career remained the same. He brought models into his studio in order to replicate what he felt might have been the poses. Of course, he had to imagine as an artist what really could have happened. He used his son Jarvis Rockwell as the standing figure and other local models to play the other parts. He had a very bright light cast upon them to get that sense of light and shadow, and was working with some portraits that he found of the victims in the newspaper to try to bring them to some kind of likeness. He did write to the art director, Alan Hurlburt, that he did not go for complete likenesses, but he wanted these to be more figureheads that told a larger story.
Rockwell also used a Pulitzer Prize-winning photograph to get the sense of what a pose could be, a photograph that probably many people would have been familiar with.
Mm-hmm. Something interesting happened with this piece, however, when he sent the final in to Look magazine, and art director Alan Hurlburt looked at it. Instead of actually publishing the final painting, which we see here, he published a study that Rockwell had done, which was far more impressionistic. And what Rockwell said later was that by the time he had gotten to the final painting, he felt that all the anger had gone out of it. So maybe it didn't have the same power that his more impressionistic study had had. But it was actually the first time that a magazine chose to publish one of his studies as opposed to his final paintings. This piece was actually done following one of Rockwell's most famous paintings called The Problem We All Live With, done in 1964, and it was followed by another painting in 1967 called New Kids in the Neighborhood, which was really another treatise on humanity and equality. So these were subjects that really meant a great deal to him, and I think he understood that as an elder statesman at that point, someone who was very well known in society, that his images would have the opportunity to perhaps help people see things in a new light. And in fact, the paintings that he did relating to the civil rights movement drew quite a bit of comment, as his paintings had throughout his entire career. He received a lot of fan mail or mail commenting upon the subjects that he did. And some was extremely positive, and some was negative in terms of the choices that he had made to paint more challenging subjects. But he continued. And I think he really felt towards the end of his life that he was doing work that had great meaning.